time to create some legitimate backups. The Multiface, a wonderful device for your Spectrum. Sorry for the paint on fingers, I have been painting and it won't come off. But what is a Multiface, I hear you cry? It's a device you put in the back of your Spectrum or Amstrad CPC, come to that if you've got the Amstrad version. You press the red button and it freezes the system. From there you can save the memory out as it stands to be loaded back in again at a later date. And you can also poke the system memory and run through everything that's in memory at that time. For example, to find ways of poking a game, giving yourself infinite lives, and so on. And it was a revelation because you could, if you had an Opus or a wafer drive or any kind of external drive, you could take your tape game, press the button, and bam, it's on disk. Arguably responsible possibly for the invention of the multi-load. Contentious thing to say, but the thing is, of course, with a device like this, it only grabs what's in memory at the time. So if, for example, your game has to load in extra levels off of the cassette, that makes it harder for someone with a Multiface to copy because they need to snapshot every single level. I don't need to tell you this stuff because you know how snapshots work, because they work exactly the same way in emulators. When you freeze a game, if it's a multi-load, when you get to the point it needs to load more, it needs that original tape back in. So yeah, an incredibly useful device. Button on the top freezes, as I say. There's a switch on the side that hides the Multiface from the system. For example, some games apparently try and detect if there's a Multiface plugged in and then won't work. So you can defeat that by pressing the button and then it will vanish, which is really good. This is a Multiface 1, which runs on a 48K Spectrum. There is also the Multiface 2, but that's for the Amstrad CPC. Multiface 1 for the Spectrum, Multiface 2 is for the CPC, and then you've got the Multiface 3, which is for the 128K Spectrums, or actually the Amstrad Spectrum, sorry, the plus 2A and plus 3, and there's a Multiface 128 as well, which is for the 128K Spectrum in Grade Plus 2. It's a little bit confusing. Basically, you need the right Multiface for your system. One thing the Multiface has, as we look at the back here, it's a serial number 7640. It has 8K of RAM in it, which can be useful for certain tasks on the Spectrum because you can actually page machine code out to that RAM and that will disable the functionality that the Multiface has, but you can actually use that memory for your coding. I can't think why you'd want to, but it's in there. The other thing Multiface can do is save screens, print out screens. Again, arguably, you don't need that these days. Why would you be wanting to print a screen out? But back in the day, incredibly useful functionality to have. And some of the later Multifaces require a Multiface to be plugged in to load an image back in. I don't think these Multiface ones do. The Multiface 3, I think, does, and the images complain. Incidentally, on the Amstrad version, yes, it requires the Multiface to be plugged in, except you can get a program that will bypass that. So if you've got any old software on your Amstrad that you save with a Multiface, there is a bit of software that will just bypass it all. But the thing is, these things are hen's teeth these days, and they can actually cost a fair amount of money to buy. I've wanted one for my Amstrad for ages and ages and ages, and thankfully someone actually came up with a recreation. It's not as pretty as that, but that is a Multiface 2. And I had to put the label on there myself because they'd left the EEPROM window open. Nice work, lads. And there's a reset button on there as well and a Multiface button, but I can never remember which one is which is handy. So when you come to freeze the game, it's like, which one's the one that freezes the game? Which one resets the system? Oh, I've just reset the system. So yeah, I mean, I found this one on eBay, 20 quid, but that's, I was lucky there because sometimes they go for considerably more. And it's got a pass-through on the back as well to plug your joystick interface into. But of course, you don't need a joystick interface unless you want a different one than a Kempston, because the Multiface one has a Kempston on the side. Forgot to mention that, because the Multiface 3, which I had on my Plus 3, doesn't have that. Also, there's some early Multiface ones that have a composite out on them, which only work if the Spectrum you've got actually has composite on the edge connector, which not all do. So there I was a few weeks ago, just browsing eBay, thinking, looking at the Spectrum stuff and going, oh, someone's done one of these recreations for the Spectrum. It's £40 and then £5 for the postage. I'm going to have me some of that. And here we are with the Multiface 3 Dual. Now, that means it's a Multiface 3 clone, so it only works on a Plus 2A and Plus 3. The listing was a little bit misleading because it says Sinclair ZX Spectrum 128K, Plus 3 and Plus 2A. And that 128K on the listing is, makes you think that, oh, well, hang on, this will work with a Grey Plus 2 or a 128K Specky. No, it will not. This Multiface 3 Dual is basically a clone of the Multiface 3. And so I've got a 3D printed case there. Paint all up my arms. And it's got two buttons on there. Bizarrely, the green one activates the Multiface and the red one resets the system. Red should be the Multiface button. Quite why they're on stalks, I have no idea. Why they couldn't be lower down there, no idea at all. But let's plug it into the Spectrum and see how well it functions. It does have a Kempston interface on it as well, which you've probably just seen there, and the pass-through. However, one gotcha, I should mention before we start here, well, I remember, this pass-through does not work with a div. You cannot do this because they interfere with each other. We'll come to the div later on because it's kind of important. But we'll plug this into my black Plus 2 and just see it working. So first of all, to show what happens if you plug this into a grey Spectrum Plus 2 or 128, you just get corruption and the machine hangs. It will not work on those machines. You need to be on a Plus 2A or Plus 3. And likewise, as I mentioned, if you plug a div on the back, this is what happens. Again, as soon as you press the button, it crashes. So again, although this machine has a pass-through, you can't use a div on it, as I said earlier. But what can it do? Well, you plug it into your Plus 2A or Plus 3, and when you press the green button on the device, not the red button, which you think it would be, given the red button was the original button on the Multiface, a menu appears with Return, Save, Tool, Print, DOS, Alter and Clear on it. And if you press Tool, you go into the poking menu where you can insert pokes and see what's going on in the machine. So I'm loading up a copy of Zub from tape. And the game has started and I'm losing energy. It's all normal. But I want to give myself infinite energy. So I've gone to the ZX Tip Shop and got some pokes to insert. So we press the green button on the Multiface. Not the red button, because the red button resets the machine. And we go into Tool. And I'm entering an address. And I enter the poke in. It automatically follows. And there I can press Q to quit or escape. But in fact, I've got some more addresses to poke. So I'll do that. And I press escape and then quit and then return. And then I'm back out to the game. So let's see if this has worked. There you go. No energy is being deducted even when I hit the barrier at the side of the game. The poke has been a success. One thing to note is sometimes you may find a poke doesn't work because You may be playing a 1 to 8K version of a game, and the poke may be for a 48K version of a game, and it doesn't always tell you that. But the tip shop is the best place to go for multi-phase pokes. We'll put an address on the screen for you. So I've loaded up CJ's Elephant Antics, and again, I'm going to press the green button on the multi-face, not the red. And we see some of the other things it can do. So there's that poke menu we saw before. I'm just going to quickly put in an infinite energy poke there. One other thing the multi-face can do that isn't so useful these days is to take screenshots, print them directly to a printer, and also save them to disk and tape. Slightly redundant in 2022, but nevertheless, this is something the original multi-face had, and it's replicated here on this clone. And I mean, there's many functions on here, but here's another useful one. You can look at the state of the memory on your Spectrum and just browse through it. Every address, what's in the registers, and you can see what's going on. Now you can look for things like decrement commands for lives, but to be honest, all that stuff's on the tip shop. So if there's probably pokes already worked out, so you won't have to do that. And did my infinite energy work? Why, yes, it did. Incidentally, there's other functionality on this new multi-face clone in terms of disk interface stuff. Because my Plus 2A doesn't have a disk interface and I don't have that stuff available, I can't test that. What I'm purely interested in here is, does it replicate the full Multiface 3 experience? It does. And the Kempston interface worked without fault. It's a Kempston interface. That's it. Oh, by the way, apologies, I'm on the camera phone this evening. I just wanted this video very quickly and I'm behind with my videos, so I needed to be fast. So we're not being very professional and we're on the rubbish microphone on the phone. But yes, so as you can see, it works. It does the job. You do have to set jumpers on there for your configuration depending on what you're doing. And I really don't like these buttons on stalks. I have no idea why anyone thought a button on a stalk was a good idea. And arguably for £40 plus postage for a recreation with a 3D printed case, you can't go far wrong. Except, I've got a lot of paint on that finger, if you own one of these, which is a Div MMC Future from the Future is 8-bit, as you can see on the back there. Now, if you have the old firmware on this and you haven't updated your firmware, you won't be aware that with the latest firmware on these, you can do pretty much everything that the multi-face can do with regards to poking values into memory for your cheats. And that's a huge thing. Look, I'm going to show you me poking a game with the Div. And as you can see, it works pretty much the same way as the multi-face does. A few less tools in there, but it works. And given the price differential between these two things, I'm going to say, unless you have some kind of ideological problem with owning a Div MMC Future, this is still the ultimate Spectrum peripheral, which can do pretty much everything this can do for most ordinary users. And therefore, yes, a couple of years ago, this would have been a fantastic peripheral to have for your Spectrum. I would have loved to have it. All the time I couldn't be poking on there, I wanted one of these. But now, I'm afraid, the Div has that functionality, and the multi-face, unless you've got specialist requirements for going, all those extra tools for going through the machine code and stuff. And arguably, you can do that in an emulator. It's much easier. Then save your money on a Multiface 3 dual and just get yourself a div.